So now, as it were, for something completely different, we're not really talking about archaeology as such in this talk. We are going to be demonstrating to you how we undertook a community co-creation project generating public outreach videos for social media. So the main reason for this presentation is to outline each workshop that we ran with Futureworks, and how we then came together and produced and edited all of the content that we collected to create some cool videos on the theme of climate change and how that impacts coastal heritage. So before I start, I'd just like to say thank you to all of these people from each organisation who we couldn't have made this project possible without. And also a big thank you to all the participants from Futureworks. One of them is in the audience today. Thank you for coming. And honestly, they put a huge amount of effort into this, and we're really proud of them. So now, I would like to show you, before we begin talking, the product of their efforts. Hopefully that security warning worked.
If you go down to Carvi Bay, walk along the coast path, gazing out at the horizon, green sea and distant islands, slopes of wildflowers and ancient stones, suddenly you'll find some mounds. You have arrived to an Iron Age fort crumbling into the sea.
When you come to somewhere like Carvi, where we are here, to see the scale of the rampart and just be in awe of the work that past people did, and to think about what could be buried under those ramparts is amazing.
It is. It's great to come here and have a look at all the sites. Who doesn't love playing in the sand? The views are great, but people are missing out because they don't know about it, and they won't try because it's too risky.
The cause of loss in this location is coastal erosion through storm action, extreme weather events, and through just general exposure. You can't really battle Mother Nature. It's quite easy when you're looking at the sort of isthmus and the eroded parts to see that it could just drop at any minute.
It's happened throughout time. Obviously, climate change has just meant it's happening much, much quicker than it previously might have been. Lots of the areas have been lost where we would have had things like roundhouses and other structures, which probably were built over several phases. Protecting heritage is so important because it is the essence of what gives us that sense of meaning and place. As you start to gradually lose the evidence, you're starting to lose a piece of your identity.
The best way to equate it is to our own memories. We have something happen to us, like a past event. We use it to learn from it in our future. That's how we've been since our birth, and we should do that as a human race as well. We should learn from what has happened in the past, what is happening with the Earth now, and all of our past to do with that.
A lot of these places where you've got heritage remaining, they are also sorts of places that have a lot of nature. And so these locations have got these different levels to them that you can experience. So there's a whole other reason for looking after our coast, because there's so much life on them.
It really is crowdsourced information that is going to come into its own soon and help us out with people taking photos or taking their own 3D models.
There'll be opportunities in a digital sense. Technology is constantly changing. We've got things like artificial intelligence, so very difficult to say, what that technology might be in the future.
Just being there, being eyes on the ground, get out and experience it and find what the meaning is for you.
Look out for our next educational video explaining Pembrokeshire's hidden heritage.
So what I should have said before I played that is that whole thing, along with some other shorts that are available via our YouTube channel and also our social media, were all filmed, edited, scripted. Some of the voices you heard there are from our participants from Futureworks. Oops. So I'm going to go through basically what we did and the methodology for the project. This was a partnership between MOLA, Pembrokeshire Coast, National Park Authority, and Futureworks. And This was funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council via MOLA's Impact Acceleration account. Now, this is a funding that we're really lucky to have, and it's designed to specifically increase the impact archaeology has in communities, particularly with respect to creating working relationships with underrepresented voices, such as English second language communities or teenagers. So we worked with participants aged 16 to 20 from Futureworks, which is, if you don't know, a council-run group aiming to address worklessness and promote social mobility by providing upskilling opportunities. They work with funding from Jobs Growth Wales Plus and has a specialist program working with young people who would otherwise struggle in mainstream education, preparing them to transition to adult life, and that's where our participants came from. So we wanted to, primarily with this project, raise awareness of climate-induced heritage loss, but more importantly, encourage these young people to explore their relationships with their heritage and their coastline. I don't think any of our participants had ever really visited the coast or any of these sites that we filmed at before. We wanted to introduce new and transferable skills in heritage, in archaeology, and in filmmaking for future life. And we were also working towards creating a better understanding of how to work with this target audience, but also with these kinds of co-creation projects, because it's something that none of the three organisations have ever done before. So we filmed at 4 case study areas: Clyfai Camp, St David's, the early medieval kist burial, lime kiln, and Iron Age promontory fort at St Bride's at Towel Point Rath, and East Blockhouse in West Angle and St Patrick's Chapel at White Sands. We planned originally for 8 sessions to run over 6 months from January to June this year, but actually, as you'll see in a minute, we ended up doing 9. So I'll just spend a few minutes going over what we did in each session. So the first session was basically all about getting to know the participants, getting to know what their needs and what they wanted out of the project, and comparing those to our own aims that we had when we were coming into this, and sort of balancing those 2 aims together. We gave them the tablets. All of these were filmed on handheld tablets. The idea of the project was to use as much consumer tech as possible, so they could continue this work at home if they wanted. And we just kind of took them around the sites at St Bride's, introducing them to the ideas of foreshore safety and taking photos and videos and just sort of easing them into it in that respect. It was all about giving them their own agency. So the second session, we started more going into detail about how to actually produce a film. So we started looking at what different skill sets, such as the 5-shot method, stop motion animation, talking about what genre we wanted for the films, what platform we were going to put them on, because these would influence decisions that we'd actually make whilst filming, sort of as simple as which way round to film, landscape, portrait, etc. But this was also the second session, starting to build consistency. We went over a lot of stuff from session 1, because we also had some new participants join us. But we also started looking into this idea of checking in and checking out and seeing where everyone is at the start versus the end of our sessions as a way of evaluating what they're learning and how they're feeling. And then we went out to Clyfai to practice all of these techniques. The third session was all about researching and sort of archaeological skill sets. So we introduced them to the HERs, to some of the records and resources that we had at Awdurdod Parc in St David's. And we also started moving more towards this idea of kinesthetic learning. So we borrowed some Rhowan borrowed some early medieval type dress from Castle Headleith. And we also had a finds handling session, which Thomas led, with finds from White Sands and St Bride's. And that was all about breaking down this idea that archaeology is something to be viewed behind glass in a museum, that you can actually get hands-on with it, and you can start to build an emotional connection So we talk sometimes quite a lot in archaeology about phenomenology and experiencing the landscape and that kind of stuff. So we took the medieval dress to White Sands. We got them placing the quartz stones on the big slabs, which you saw in that first video, trying to create this emotional connection, but then also talking about how we present that on film as well. So session 4, we intended to be sort of teaching digital techniques, but we actually changed this session up to focus more on scripting and interviewing, because we saw that the participants actually needed some more direction with all of these creative ideas they were coming up with. It became clear that they were so creative we probably wouldn't get them finished on time. So we sort of had to channel those creative efforts down more in towards creating a final script, and then also practicing some interview techniques so we could actually get their voices to be heard. Now, a lot of these participants didn't want to be recorded. You probably noticed in that video, it was either backs of heads or from a distance. They didn't want to be on camera, and they were really uncertain about having their voices recorded as well. And it was really thanks to the efforts of Tom Bean from the park, who encouraged them to come out of their shells and be recorded in that way. Post the site visit to East Blockhouse, we also recorded a little script, but we didn't actually use this in the final videos. But hopefully, if I play it for you, you'll see where it fed into that video you saw at the start.
If you go to Angle Beach and follow the footpath past the cafe, through the gate and across the sheep fields, then you will see Fawn Island, and if you're lucky, some lambs. Then you spot these concrete World War II bunkers and gun emplacements. Then when you see the view of Haven, there will be Crumbly Castle on the cliff. If you go to Angle Beach...
So then in session 5, we practiced and actually put those interview techniques into action. This was really, really windy, wet day at Caibai, so we hunkered down. That's us hiding behind one of the ramparts out of the wind. And myself and Thomas were interviewed by the participants, and all of the audio, pretty much, that we recorded on this day formed that script that you heard in that first video. But this really highlighted the need for staff who had the skill sets or could learn the skill sets to be able to keep us on track and have that pace and be able to come up with the technology we needed to record in such adverse weather conditions. Session 6 was another return to hands-on heritage, and this was more about, we were coming into the final stages of the project at this point, gearing up for the editing process, and we needed to get some final shots, but we started off, Mitch came down to teach us all how to do some wood carving, we all sat around a fire, created some wooden spoons, but this importantly got us into that mindset of the creative flow state. But also, perhaps more importantly, it got us talking openly about issues like mental health, talking about what's going on in participants' lives currently and how being outdoors and how being involved in this project is actually helping them in more ways than this final product would in the end. It became really obvious through this that actually these particular group of people were far more comfortable talking to us outside. And we had some of our most productive conversations walking along the coastal path to and from the minibus to site, rather than in the classroom. So unfortunately, the editing process did have to occur in a classroom. So sessions 7 and 8 were both undertaken at the Futureworks building. These were full-day sessions, sat around a computer. I had the editing software up on the big screen, sort of like this, how you're looking at it now. And I was sort of typing away at the laptop, rearranging all of the audio and all the video clips, and we had a round table where people were throwing ideas at me, and I was clipping and changing and playing back, and we were having this to and fro discussion, basically. It was a really creative sort of group effort at this point. We also identified through this some elements that were missing, such as music, the intro and outro that you heard, which Rhowan actually ended up filming in the back of the minibus because we didn't have anywhere to record it that was quiet. And also some animation and stuff as well. So one of our participants was really excited by the prospect of doing animation. They didn't really want to be on camera or even have their voice recorded, but they created the little anime character that you saw in the start and end, and they animated that themselves, and they were happy to do that in their own time, I think. And I think he was really excited that somebody actually wanted his skills to be used for something useful. So that was really cool. But it was really hard for the participants to stay focused all day in this environment. And they needed regular breaks. And I think there wasn't a lot of natural light in this room either, so it was quite hard to concentrate all day. Session 8 was basically the same, but you can see here the setup that we had, where we had this big screen and everyone sort of pitching ideas. This is probably the main part of the project that is completely different to how if anyone in this room has ever dabbled in video editing or makes content for social media in your respective companies also, you'll know it's a very different process to what you usually go through. This idea of a democratic roundtable and doing it all together. And this, again, highlighted the need to have someone dedicated to learning how all of the software works. So none of us are experts in videography. I sort of dabble with it in my spare time, but we were lucky enough with this project to be able to have the time to learn all of these skills and then teach them. But saying that, most of this stuff I learned the day before. And then we had our unplanned session in July. And this came about because we had a little bit of money left over, but also a guy called John Ewch from Planed came to visit us to interview and document this video creation process with the participants, and they actually gained a qualification in media production out of it, which was a really unforeseen circumstance that happened, and thank you to Thomas for organising that. But that was really, really cool thing to come out of this. And while we were there, we used the opportunity to look at all the content that we didn't end up putting in that main video to create some shorter style reels. We don't have time to show you all of those today, but we did pick what we agree is probably the most creative video to come out of this, just to quickly show you.
Oh no, I might fall. Come to Sgwrs Parc Cenedlaethol on the coastal. Well, I seen like an old Tudor lookout base. Yeah, I went past a little narrow passageway, and as I got there, I felt a little chill, and my feet felt really heavy, like I was going to fall or something. Like angel looking over me saying, "Don't slip now." So I just kept to myself, like. But yeah, it was quite cool. I like history quite a lot, especially like World War, medieval, and Tudor kind of was right up my alley. I think we should protect them the best we can, really.
Look out for our next educational video explaining Pembrokeshire's hidden heritage.
So now I'm going to pass over to Rhowan, who will discuss some of the benefits and some of the learnings that we got from this project.
Thanks, Kit. You probably picked up on quite a lot of the softer outcomes, but I'm just going to kind of reiterate some of that. But first of all, we'll talk about how the project changed. So right at the beginning, we really wanted to get to know the young people involved, and we were sort of guided by their interests and their needs. And this led us more towards some of the more kinesthetic learning, so introducing animation, and that was something that really engaged that particular individual Kit spoke about. The wood carving session was fantastic with Mitch, one of our one of our staff members from the Routes to Discovery and Pathways projects. Dressing up, that was something that some people really wanted to do, other people were really reluctant to do, but were persuaded and then actually ended up really enjoying it. And the reenactment as well, we just kind of really wanted people to get that embodied experience. We were outdoors, but could we imagine what people might have been doing in the past? As Kit said, we needed to encourage them a lot to use their voices. We heard Rhys in the last video, who's a young man, he's a prop, plays for Pembroke youth rugby team, and he's great. He's a very colourful character, great sense of humour. He loves exploring abandoned buildings. He's actually got a genuine passion for history, so this was sort of ideally suited to him. But also because he's from Pembroke and he's got that really local accent, and we were really keen that we could get his voice, you know, in some of the final product, and have that real local connection. So it did take, you know, quite a lot of persuasion and quite a lot of support to sort of develop a script collaboratively that then Rhys could read out. And so it was really good. Then that became kind of the structure and the basis that we used in the final film. We changed from, at the outset, we thought that young people would be working in pairs and kind of making their individual films. We then halfway through thought we'd switch to sort of more role-based production, so maybe there'd be one person who's animating, one person who was into music that would create a bit of a soundtrack, somebody else would be doing interviewing, etc. And in the end, it became much more of a group kind of whole. So roles weren't that strictly divided. And particularly as people's kind of confidence grew, they were willing to try other things out. Here are some of the project benefits. So, as we've said, for young people, the softer benefits, the mental well-being of getting outdoors. And, you know, none of them had visited any of these sites previously. Then also, over a number of sessions, particularly doing the interview techniques, just that confidence building, and building of communication skills, building of self-esteem, you know, and the belief that they can do it, because at the outset they were like, no, that's not for me. I don't want to have my voice recorded. No, I don't know what questions I'm going to ask. But when you kind of repeat that activity over several sessions, then it does kind of sink in. And the encouragement, you know, to pursue your interests. So we were able to be flexible enough to incorporate people's interests. Benefits for heritage, obviously, promoting the understanding of coastal heritage at risk, also massively overcoming barriers to access. So these young people haven't been taken to these sites previously, they don't have access to transport to travel independently, so we were able, you know, obviously to arrange that side of things. And also massively hearing from a kind of underrepresented demographic who aren't very present in this room, sad to say. Benefits for our organisations, I'd say it's probably true for both MOLA and the National Park Authority. It's giving us that experience of how to approach these kinds of co-created projects in the future. So this was a very distinct process from, say, commissioning a filmmaker to make a film, or even commissioning a professional filmmaker to work with a group to make a film, or to document a project that we've been doing. It really kind of gave us that experience, and it's going to help inform the things that we do in the future. Also, that experience of working with, you know, these kinds of young people who are supported by Futureworks, and kind of building better understanding and confidence in that kind of thing, with, you know, a huge amount of mentoring and advice from Futureworks staff, Michelle in particular. And then, learning these things about why people aren't engaging. Maybe their self-perception is that they're just not outdoors people. Maybe it is these other barriers, like transport and the cost of travel, time, and so on. So some of our key learnings. On the national park side, you probably saw there was quite a long list of team members involved. And so people were chopping and changing quite a lot between sessions. But it was really useful for Thomas and I to be there consistently. And I think when we had more consistency, particularly with Tom Bean, who's a brilliant educator, then that really helps you in getting to know individuals and build up that sort of trusted relationship that you need. Obviously there were a lot of staff involved, and sometimes different individuals had different ideas about what we're doing that day. So establishing roles clearly and early is quite a useful thing, and give yourself enough time to meet beforehand so that you can really kind of thrash ideas around as facilitators. We thought there's running sessions closer together to preserve the momentum, because we were running them roughly a month apart. Might have been really helpful. And that might have helped to some degree with retention, because some of the young people found other placements in the course of this project, so we lost them. But also, it could have been a 12-month project. So this kind of 6-month phase could have then led on to something else, so that young people could develop upon the skills that they gained. Be mindful of the environments where you're running the sessions. As we said, outdoor learning worked brilliantly. Everyone was really relaxed, really focused, really engaged. There was no silly behaviour or anything like that. When we were indoors, try and avoid, that kind of heavy classroom style setting. Try and find a room that has good acoustics, that's not too bouncy, particularly if you're doing stuff as a group. Try and make sure there's fresh air, daylight, not too hot, all those sorts of things. Allow for plenty of breaks. And I do recommend the Discovery Room at Awdurdod Park for that sort of thing. It's quite a permeable building, so we could use the outdoors on the grounds as well as the indoors. And other than that, just kind of keep it fun, informal. Don't be like up here lecturing to a classroom. I think I'm going to hand back to Kit to sum up.
I think some of the participants would agree there was no silliness because they're scared of falling off the cliff as well. So just to sum up our top 3 takeaways for this, contrary potentially to what you think and what we've said, we believe genuinely that anyone can undertake this kind of co-creation process. As I said, none of us are experts in filmmaking. We all learnt these skills for the project, and any additional skills that came as a result of additional staff members were a pure bonus to that. If you are lucky enough to be able to learn this stuff, even the night before anything is great, but it's all about learning together and seeing where the process will take you out of that. One thing we probably would do is to scale down the breadth of options that we offered. And what I mean by that is, I said earlier that we had 4 case study sites, but St Bride's had 3 different areas that we went to, so that's probably 7 different sites that we filmed at in the end. This was way too much for the length of project that we had. We visited some of the sites twice, but some of them we couldn't go to again because we didn't have time. I would, if I run this again, do it with 1 or maybe 2 different places to go to. You can visit other sites to show them, but filming at all of these different things and then trying to force that content into something small is just really difficult. But perhaps most importantly, the participants' needs should come before the project's needs. So a lot of us, if we work for funded projects, the funder will have stipulations. I work at the moment for a project that's funded by the NHLF, and there's a lot of restrictions that come with that. Luckily, we're really, really privileged that the funding that this project came out of, I could basically do anything as long as I justified it in a way that meant that archaeology was impactful. And in that case, what the participants wanted to do, that was the impact that we were generating. So I think we do this job for communities, I think, and that's really important to keep in mind and to keep that focus. But don't be afraid to try new things if you're interested in doing this kind of stuff. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, if you're interested in more, the rest of the YouTube playlist, you can follow those QR codes to see the others. Thank you.